teachers of Reddit, what is your best read the note to the class story? Was the student, not the teacher. In 3rd grade, about 1996, my class was performing a play. I had a total of 2 lines of dialogue, but I really wanted to get it right. So I copied my lines from the textbook, folded it up, and stuck it in my pocket. The teacher only saw the last bit of this, but assumed I was sticking a note in my pocket, and told me to get up in front of the class and read it out loud. I recited my lines verbatim, and handed the note to the teacher. Without reading it, she assumed I was being a smart aleck, and sent me to the principal's office, where I received recess detention and a call to my parents. Not sure why I never asked anyone to read the note, but I didn't. The next day, when I arrived at school, my teacher pulled me aside and told me that she had read the note, realized what it was, and apologized profusely. She took me down to the office to call my parents and let me go out for 2 periods of recess. Props to Mrs. W for the life lesson about humility and doing the right thing. I still remember. I was in 8th grade, and it was a hot sunny day in mid-May. I wrote, "It's snowing," on a piece of paper, and showed it to my friend sitting next to me, who immediately looked out the window. We both laughed, because obviously it wasn't snowing. Then he and I laughed when I showed it to another student and they immediately looked out the window, and so on, until most of the class is in on the joke and watching as I show the piece of paper to the next unwitting fool. Almost every student knows what's going on when my teacher sees that I'm showing this piece of paper to everyone and making them laugh. She walks over to my desk, looks down at the piece of paper that says, "It's snowing," and instinctively looks out the window. The entire class bursts out in laughter. I don't know why, but this is one of the funniest things I've seen on Reddit. I think it's the purity of it. No mean-spirited pranks, no sad stories about bullying or broke students. Just kids having a good time poking fun at each other and at themselves. If more people took themselves less seriously, maybe we wouldn't have a lot of the problems we have today. Similar story here. Also 8th grade. A student wrote, "Does anyone know how those bike tracks got on the ceiling?" on a note, and passed it along. One after another, all 28 people looked up to the ceiling, making the others laugh with each new one. The teacher noticed, took the note, looked up to the ceiling, and, with utter confusion written on her face, said, "Which bike tracks?" and scanned the ceiling once more. Needless to say, we couldn't contain our laughter either. I'm not a teacher, but I have a story which was kind of the opposite. When I was in college, I was in a large math lecture hall 2 times a week, and me and my friends took to making paper planes and throwing them down from the back of the theater. We did it often, and I'm sure we thought we were hilarious. Somehow nobody said a word, except for the occasional snicker, and it went on like that, on and off for the semester. Then, on the last day I remember writing, "Happy Christmas, Dr. Jones," on a plane, and throwing it down, seeing it land in front of the lecturer. He blew a fuse, and started shouting about how this had been going on all semester, and he thought it was a disgrace. Then he picked up the plane and read the message, got very embarrassed, and meekly said, "Thank you." I still cringe to think of my childish actions, but it did give me that moment of connection with the lecturer. Before failing his class. Maybe you failed because you spent too much time on planes. Hey, at least you had good timing on the Happy Christmas when he blew up. Plot twist. He's now an airplane engineer. But then OP got really drunk, blacked out, and designed a fully functional plane overnight after failing the class. Not gonna lie, I really hated people like you in college. Another non-teacher here, but my 7th grade teacher typically always wore a dress shirt to class and looked very presentable. But this day, he had his sleeves rolled up. Now, everyone loved this teacher, but my immediate thought was to write a note to my friend sitting beside me that his arms were super hairy, and that note was passed back and forth with us cracking jokes about it. Nothing malicious or overly mean, just that we didn't think he'd have such hairy arms. We eventually got caught, and between classes, he took us aside and warned us to not pass notes. And since this was the first time this happened, he would toss it out without reading it and let us go. Well, a couple months go by, and he decides to wear short sleeves again, and his arms were noticeably less hairy. I know 12-year-olds don't have the greatest moral compass, but to this day, I still feel so bad that my dumb little note might have made him so self-conscious about something so unimportant. I'm sorry, Mr. Fifield, wherever you are now. This made my heart melt. We can be cruel, especially at a young age. We made a teacher cry one time. Changed the whole dynamic of the class. We were very nice after that day to the point where we still hit him up when we are back in town. He's even been to quite a few of our weddings. It hit us all so hard to see a grown man tear up. I think we went to him after school to apologize. Best part of growing older is being able to hang with the teachers who we gave heck to in grade school. Edit. Worst part is hearing about some of them passing away. 2 from old age and 1 in a car accident. I never really had one of those super liked teachers, except for one guy. He retired and literally no one wanted him to go because he always went the extra mile to make sure you understood everything. A few weeks go by and he came by to, I guess, fill out some paperwork. It was right when all classes were having a break, and when he entered the break area, everyone clapped for him. I don't think I've ever seen a smile that big on a teacher's face. Pretty awesome if your pupils have that much respect for you as a teacher. I taught for a decade in a really rough area. I intercepted a lot of notes and was pretty shameless in public humiliation of my kids. I read a lot of the bad stuff out loud. However, one really nice moment that stands out was when the super popular bubbly Latina girl sat next to the stereotyped depressed weird white theater band girl. I see them passing notes, which is really uncharacteristic. The band girl seemed off and upset, but I'll let it go because it seemed like there was something going on more, and the Latina girl was a really nice kid. I didn't think she was bullying or anything. I had the girls stay after for a second and asked them what was up. The Latina girl said, I was worried about her. She looked sadder than usual. So I wanted to make sure she's cool. I asked the other girl if that's what was happening, and she said yep, and showed me the notes, which was a really heartfelt convo about boys, relationships and feeling lonely. It was so darn sweet. I asked if they needed more time, and they both said yes. I could get them excused from their next class, and they asked if they could chill and talk more. I said sure, because you bet your BP wellness and mental health is a ton more important than curriculum. They really had a moment, and it seemed to help them both. This was as 10th graders. I got to see them really develop a nice friendship over the next few years. Go girls. Wherever you are now, I hope you're still friends, and I'm glad I could help facilitate that. You sound like a great teacher. Valuing mental health over curriculum feels so rare these days. My daughter gets excused to see a counselor to help with her depression. One week she had to be excused for the last 15 minutes of history because it was a half day and class times were compressed. Her teacher wouldn't let her go, even when the office paged him. I was ticked off that he thought her seeing the movie they watched in class that day was more important than her gaining tools to cope in a healthy manner. Thank you for being a good human. Those girls will never forget that you cared. I don't know if this is the best, but it's pretty profound. I usually ignored note passing. If a student didn't want to pay attention, but wasn't bothering anyone else, I was cool. In the age of cell phones, notes were kind of outdated anyway. So I had this student who could do origami like a boss, and he was always making all kinds of animal figures and cool shapes that I would put on the corkboard behind my desk. This one day he is getting his fold on and is completely focused and not paying attention. Before I know it, class is over and it's on my desk. He stops on the way out of my class and says, "You're gonna wanna read that." I read it, and it was him asking for lunch money cause his mom took off and he was hungry. It hurts being a teacher some days. Were you able to give him the money? I've heard that teachers aren't allowed to directly intervene like that sometimes. Absolutely. And I put money into his cafeteria account. If anything, at least he'd be able to eat breakfast and lunch at school. Unfortunately, I also had to make a CPS report. Why unfortunately? You may have saved the kid from much more serious problems. If he stayed in your class, he knows you're always there to call upon if he needs help. It may hurt to be a teacher some days, but it can also be the most important thing you can do on those same days. It's a double-edged sword. In some situations, even if the parents are bad, CPS can just make things worse all around. It's a risk, but no intervention is often a greater risk to the survival of a child. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more videos like this. Don't forget to leave your stories in the comments below.